Hi, everyone. We're just waiting for the room to fill up here. Um, we have several hundred people who've registered today, and everybody just seems to be joining now. Um, Somebody just asked a question about the recording. Um, for a little bit of context, since COVID has sent everybody home, our company Humi has been in the midst of putting together content. It's actually hosted on a website that's publicly available, anybody, clients or not. So this webinar will be recorded. It will be available. Will be on that website alongside the previous webinars that we've already conducted, as well as a couple of future webinars that we plan on running over the next few weeks. Our team's just posted it there in the chat if anybody wants to go check it out. Particularly of reference, there's a number of questions that came in prior to our webinar today that related more directly to legal implications or employment law rather than the subsidies or ongoing government programs. And unfortunately, Chris, although he's an expert in many things, is not a lawyer. And so I would recommend if anybody has specific questions that refer to employment law to check out that resource. We ran our first webinar covering legal implications 2 weeks ago. It was so well attended and there was so much content to get through that we ran a second last week. So there's about 2 hours of content, a ton of different questions that we were able to capture there. Really, really valuable content. Incredible work from a friend of ours, Nathaniel Marshall, at Turn Penny Milne, which is a fantastic employment law firm here in Canada. But with that being said, I think we've got a lot of people now, hundreds of people now on the call. I think that it's about time to kick it off. For those of you who are not familiar with Humi, who are not clients, I think it makes sense today to just give a brief introduction who we are. Our company is a HR and payroll software company that also happens to act as a group benefits and insurance brokerage. We are obviously far from the physical front lines, but certainly on the software-based front lines of a lot of the things that are happening today with regard to wage subsidies, HR and legal implications that might be conducted within the software. And so obviously we've been really in tune and spending a lot of our time thinking about how we can help not only our clients, but people more broadly. A lot of people had asked questions specifically about the wage subsidy. We've been spending a lot of our time helping our clients manage that process. And Chris, who's with us today, happens to be an absolute expert. Chris joined Humi several years ago, actually through an acquisition of a company that he started maybe 5+ years ago. Chris, maybe you can give some detail there. But Chris started a payroll company in his apartment, became an expert, created incredible relationships with the CRA, really ingrained himself in this content before joining Humi and becoming our VP of Client Experience. So a lot of you on the call probably are familiar with Chris, have probably talked to Chris in the past, extremely smart guy, has put together some really incredible content to present today. And so I'm excited to, share his mind with you, and I'll try to ask some good questions along the way. In addition to his content, he's put together a great presentation. We're going to have some time, hopefully at the end, for question and answer. So at the bottom of your screen, I believe it's the bottom, it depends on what kind of software you're using. There's an opportunity to hit the question and answer section. We're going to let those questions stack for the most part throughout the presentation and then try to get to them at the end. If we don't have time for whatever reason to get to your question, we will put together either a part 2 or address each question individually and get back to everybody. So without further ado, Chris.
Awesome, Simon. Too kind as usual. And just to let everyone know as well, I know these types of things tend to maybe run a little bit long and stuff like that. But if I see any questions that have any type of urgency surrounding them, like I can guarantee you right now that I'll get back to you personally around those and make sure that that you have an answer before the end of the day. So just to kind of set the level for going through the presentation today, we're actually going to start with one thing that came up more than almost anything else when it came to just the subsidies or what we're doing or anything like that. And it's just how to navigate the coronavirus resources that are out there. I think this is exceptionally important because not only is it an economic kind of huge deal, it's also a health related huge deal. It's a huge deal for the country. And the government of Canada has really mobilized around this in a bigger way than I've ever seen in my lifetime, that's for sure. And because there's so much information out there, there's so much misinformation, and more than anything, forget the misinformation, really more than anything, I've had so many people ask me questions with the sentiment around, how do I know what I'm missing? Or how do I know what I need to actively go get? What kind of things are out there for me that I could benefit from in this tough time? And because there's so much information, it's hard to navigate what you have to actively do. And it's also hard to understand, if applying for something would preclude you from applying for something else. And so I really start with the context there. Then I do a quick summary of the economic response plan, which really just shows you all of the different things that are out there for you with like hyperlinks to exactly where you would go to apply, and then really dive deep into the subsidies, which is the bulk of what we're going to talk about today, because that is what payroll companies take care of, A, and B, because it's what's on the top of everyone's mind that runs small businesses, manages small businesses, and not even necessarily small businesses. I mean, we've got clients that have hundreds of employees that are asking questions about this stuff as well. So I'm going to dive right in here, and I'm going to start with the kind of breakdown along the side. So there's six sections here down along the side. It's the coronavirus information, Canada's response to it, the economic response plan, and then the breakdown of that economic response plan for individuals, for businesses, and for industries. And it's really important to understand this, because this is how the government of Canada is pushing out information to everyone. So when I actually send out this presentation here, you can click on the little Canadian flag, and it'll bring you directly to the page that I'm speaking about. What's really, really, really impressive is that the support for individuals and support for businesses are super, super, super specific, and they're going to actually be able to give you really tactical advice around exactly what you're looking for, and we'll get into that in 1 second. So
And just to reiterate there, Chris, and I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll have asked questions already about accessing this content after the webinar. Not only is the presentation going to be available as a recording on the website that we've shared there in the chat, but as well, we're going to be sending around this deck, which has those hyperlinks to the content that Chris is referencing. So needless to say that this is a really dense deck. Might be hard to, take it all in at once. So we're going to be sending that around.
Exactly. And Simon, thank you for stopping me there, because this stuff here, the coronavirus information, Canada's response, and the economic response plan, this is the political stuff. This is the stuff that shows the macroeconomic response, the massive pandemic response, how you can stay healthy, can you travel, all of this kind of stuff, and what Canada is doing about it. The more important stuff is right here. So this support for individuals, this is actually one of the best government pages I've ever seen in my life. It actually might be the best government page I've ever seen in my life. When you click into it here, and it brings you directly into here, it has support for individuals broken down by families, by people facing loss of income, by people who need it most. And really in each step, you can drop down. So if you have a child, you can drop down and say, it will literally tell you exactly what you need to do and if you need to apply. If you are facing a loss of income, you have friends and family facing a loss of income, send them this link. It has the Canadian emergency response benefit, exactly how to apply with instructions. For people who need it most, for seniors, if you have grandparents, if you have parents that might need to tap into their RIFs, exactly what to do. And so really the government of Canada mobilized around this and got some really smart people to come up with A, the actual services that they're going to do, and B, like I said, this page is one of the best pages that I've seen. A couple things that I would call out here are mortgage support. We had a lot of questions about that. Obviously, everyone knows that there's extra time to file income tax returns this year. There's specific rules around that. The Canadian Emergency Response and Benefit. This one's super important because it interacts with some of the other subsidies that we're going to talk about today. And then also one that I'll call out as well, youth support for mental health. So that's something that we think about the seniors that are affected by this, but also important to maybe share with your children or other young people that you might know. The support for business is similar. So this support for business, again, is an absolutely wonderful resource. It's got the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. I'm going to break down all of this stuff for you in this presentation today over the course of the next 45 minutes. But for stuff like access to credit, you know, if you're running a company and you want access to credit, there's so many more programs today than there was 15 days ago. Supporting financial stability, there's so much more access to not only credit, but different types of wage subsidies and programs and stuff like that. And it's all really laid out here in the support for business. One of the things, again, that I would really point out here is that there's massive changes every day. When I was building this presentation, there wasn't this change to the Canada Summer Jobs Program. As of yesterday, there's huge amounts of programs that allow you to get up to 100% of a summer student's salary. So a lot of people were asking questions about that and internships and how much would be covered around that kind of stuff. And these things are changing every day. So it's really important to take this presentation and just really go through those hyperlinks because they're wonderful, wonderful resources.
And again, you know, just to reiterate, when we do send this out, and Chris, if you flip back, yeah, you know, each of these separate sections on the left is actually a separate page, and that Canadian flag in the top left links to the resources that are being referenced here on that page. So hopefully, once it's in everybody's hands, it will be a useful place to just sift through everything that might be relevant to your business.
Exactly, and feel free to share this, you know, far and wide as well. I think one of the weaknesses of Canada.ca is it's so hard to navigate and it's so hard to understand the breakdown of what's available. So I think that little 6-step on the side really shows you that, you know, you've got your coronavirus information, Canada's, you know, health response to the pandemic, the economic response plan, all of the politics around it, and the amounts of money going to different things. But then really in Canada's economic response plan, the support for individuals, support for businesses, and support for industries is where you're tactically going to be able to go in there, find out what's happening, and then for the most part, apply directly through a portal, or it will tell you exactly what to do to facilitate it. So as a part of this support for business, there's 2 major wage subsidies, the Temporary Wage Subsidy and the Emergency Wage Subsidy. And as of April 9th, there was actually some big changes announced yesterday. But really what I want to get into today, and where the bulk of the questions that we've received as a payroll company are what are the wage subsidies? What's the difference between them? And, you know, how do we apply for them? How do we get them? What action is required? And so I wanted to get into them by putting them side by side here. So first of all, the 10% wage subsidy was announced on March 18th, and then approximately a week and a half later, the 75% emergency wage subsidy was announced. Eligibility is different for them. So the 10% temporary wage subsidy is only for small business. So if you're a Canadian controlled privately held company and you're a small business, you can get up to $25,000 back in your subsidy per employer, or $13.75 per employee, up to 10% of gross pay. So this one's really easy to qualify for. It's almost automatic in a lot of ways, as long as you're a Canadian controlled private company. And we'll get into how to facilitate it in 1 second.
So just for clarity there with regard to eligibility, because I remember even for us, you know, I was confused a little bit about the one stipulation, that $15 million of taxable capital, I believe is the terminology. You know, since then I think I understand it a little bit better, which is that really what that is referenced to is really $15 million of profits over the course of the business, or $15 million of capital raised without losses that may have offset that 15 million. That capital could have been raised with, you know, equity financing, debt capital, almost any form of fundraising that would have brought you over that $15 million mark. Is that like a fair, simplified summary of what that 15 million taxable capital would really refer to?
Exactly, Simon. So I mean, that's exactly correct. And what I would encourage is that if you believe that you're coming up against that, so if you're a hyper profitable company or a hyper you know, venture funded, but and also in addition to that, profitable company, you might want to look closer into that. And I'm super happy to chat with any of the of our clients, or anyone that's not a client as well, about the specific treatment of that. It's really the reason I kept it off of this summary slide here is it applies to 1% of all companies that fall into this. If you're a small business, and you don't even need to be that small. I mean, Humi qualifies for this, and we've got almost 60 employees. So it's a fair assumption that you would qualify for this 10% temporary wage subsidy.
Yeah, I think that the easy test also is if you're available, or sorry, if the small business tax credits are available to your business, you also qualify for this subsidy.
Yeah, in every case, exactly. On the 75% emergency wage subsidy, you've got to prove a 15% in March and a 30% revenue drop in April and May. Now, we're going to get a little bit deeper into this eligibility in a second, and exactly how you would prove it out. And again, this is all in these slides, so don't worry about like taking notes or anything like that, or me bumbling an explanation, because it's all out there in perfect plain English, as well as the exact links to where the government has press released it or announced it, like the official documentation around it. And this subsidy is massive. This subsidy is 75% of gross pay, up to almost $60,000, to a max of $850 per week per employee. So this subsidy is exceptionally substantial. The government is really taking this seriously. This 75% subsidy was really a response by the Trudeau government to kind of a little bit of an outrage around how little the 10% would do. And it's actually a completely different subsidy altogether. And if we look at those bottom three rows now, the availability, the period of, and how it's facilitated, you can see how different they are as well. So the 10% temporary wage subsidy is effective now. It's available now. You do it through your payroll provider. So it's facilitated through a reduction in the income tax remittance through your payroll provider, which means that if you've got a payroll provider, if you don't do it in-house, most of them have some form of like help around it. Some of them just allow you to edit the tax amounts. I'm really proud to say, this is maybe a little plug, but I'm super proud to say that Humi worked a night and day on this to get this out first to market, around the reporting on it, as well as the deduction being facilitated right away. And we'll show Humi clients on the call, because I think we've got a couple hundred Humi clients on the call here, around how exactly to just facilitate it within the software. And that won't just be for Humi clients as well, because when I show how to facilitate it, I'll show how it's reported and calculated and all of that kind of stuff as well. And for the 75,
Chris, just coming back to that point, we already had a question here, a live question, just with regard to how we are handling that for clients. If you're not a client, yep, and you do want assistance with facilitating the subsidy, Chris will be sending out resources that can help you calculate the subsidy and handle the math and the reporting yourself. But if you are interested in having that sort of automated, our software is providing that automation. It's as simple as clicking a button, and Chris will show that off in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm actually going to show it in just a second, but just for everyone that isn't a Humi client as well, whether you're with another payroll provider or not, I created an Excel document and Google Sheet just to show exactly how it's calculated and how it's supposed to be reported as well. And I'll provide those tools and resources with the presentation when we send it out. Just to get back to that 75% emergency wage subsidy, and maybe hopefully I didn't bury the lead here, but it's not actually available until approximately mid-May. And the reason it was announced so far in advance is because it's got to pass a bunch of government debate. All the parties need to be kind of aligned to it, or at least it needs to pass. I'm not exactly sure what the vote is, but it will need to pass through. And it's got to also be retroactive, available for the whole period though. So this puts some companies into a weird spot, right? Where do you hire back people at 75%, even though you can't get the cash access till around mid-May? And around mid-May, it doesn't seem like a very confidence-inspiring date either. The government a couple of weeks ago said that the subsidy would be available in approximately 6 weeks, and then they retrofitted that to approximately mid-May. So I know they're working hard to get it out there and get funds available to people. That's actually going to be facilitated through a CRA portal. So pretty much when you go check any of your RP001 account or your RC001 account on your My Business account, very similar to when you're filing taxes or anything like that. You go to your business account and there'll be a portal there that lets you apply for the 75% emergency wage subsidy. That portal is currently under construction. They're building it right now. I have a lot of confidence that they'll do a good job, in the sense that they just did it for the CERB for the individuals, and the portal is extremely easy to navigate. And people have received their money almost instantaneously. They're crediting people the day that they apply. So I've been really impressed with their handling of that. Although I'm not super impressed with the eligibility revenue stuff. That stuff doesn't make too much sense, but we'll go through that in a second.
And just coming back, we had a live question here with regard to, being a rep in a CRA portal. Will that give you access? It's definitely, I think, too soon to know for sure. I know, Chris, you've been in touch with a lot of people at the CRA. Do you have any details with regard to who within a business, in terms of their CRA site access, would maybe have the ability to enact this?
Yeah, my understanding, and I have been in touch with the CRA quite extensively around this. My understanding is that the portal they're building is going to be very similar to the My Business account. In fact, it might live in there. So if you're a rep, you should be able to get into it. Like if you're someone that is an account that represents a company, or you're a rep but don't own the business account. Like for instance, I'm a rep on the Humi account. I don't own the Humi business bank account, but I would be able to go in there and help facilitate the emergency wage subsidy and apply for it. Again, it's too early to know because the portal hasn't even been released yet and they're still developing it. But to me, it's going to look a lot like when you get a tax refund. It'll show up in that portal. The money will get wired to your account or credited to your account. There will be a paper trail with really good reporting around it. It's going to look a lot like that, because they're going to, I imagine, to speed it up, they're going to use a lot of the same types of formatting around that kind of stuff. So I'm going to start with this 10% temporary wage subsidy. And Simon, keep hitting me with these live questions.
There's a lot of them. So we're going to be holding most until the end.
Okay.
If there's any that are hyper relevant and quick like that, I'll try to slot them in. But there is a lot of questions already coming through, and there was a lot that came through prior. So hopefully we'll have a chance. Hopefully through the content, we'll answer a lot of these questions. That's why I've actually put a number of them on hold, is because I know that this content is really in depth. So I won't hold back. I won't hold back too much, but I'll try to let you continue, because I know there's a lot of good stuff coming up.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and just to reiterate, guys, I mean, I will, if there's any urgency to the questions, I will definitely personally get back to you on those. So we're gonna dive into this 10% temporary wage subsidy first, and the reporting surrounding it. So I'm gonna quickly navigate away into just the way that Humi is dealing with this. And so I've got a demo account open with Aviato. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with that company, but it's
Fictional.
yeah, from one of our favorite shows here. But I'm just going to jump into our payroll settings. So this is for people that I know. We've got a couple hundred Humi clients on the call, but for people that aren't Humi clients, this is just what the Humi software looks like. I'm just going to come into our payroll and then our settings. And so for all Humi clients that have not done so and believe that they're eligible, please just come to payroll, to settings, and tick off yes to this COVID-19 wage subsidy. Does your company qualify? Beyond that, you actually don't need to do anything. If all you joined the call for was to figure out how to set this up, and you don't care about any of the other stuff, you can drop off now, because it's really just settings and then does your company qualify. And now I'm just going to jump into what it looks like to report on this stuff. And I'm going to show you in Humi, and then I'm going to show you with an Excel sheet as well, so that you can get a sense of how to do it in both ways. And your payroll provider, whether it be Ceridian or ADP or WagePoint or Wave or whomever, they will also have some way of handling this. And we'll like, hopefully it looks something like this. So if we just go ahead and run this payroll, this P7 payroll, what's going to show up here in Humi, and something that should show up in your own payroll providers as well, is this final CRA remittance amount will be adjusted to reflect the period's claims for the COVID-19 wage subsidy. And this is the most confusing part about this 10% temporary wage subsidy here. The most confusing part is that there are 2 CRA remittance line items for every single pay run now. What that means is that the CRA remittance is actually a record for every payroll period that is made up of CPP, EI, the employer CPP, the employer EI, and income tax. And the bulk of it is general income tax. And so this income tax amount that you took from your employees did not change. You still reduce the exact same amount of income tax from your employees. And those exact same numbers will go onto T4s, and those exact same numbers will sum up to T4 summaries that you submit at the end of the year. And so when you get a subsidy amount back, a claim back, it's actually going to reduce the amount of your post-claim remittance, and it's going to change this amount here. So when that actually happens, and this little details here is going to show 0 on the post-claim remittance because this is a demo environment and we're not actually sending any money, so it's showing 0 because we didn't queue up any credits for it. But this post-claim remittance is going to be a different amount than the CRA remittance record. And if I just flip back to my little presentation here, this is actually extremely important to do because you're going to have to keep this for when you apply for that 75% wage subsidy as well. I don't know for sure 100% what the government will ask you for when you go and apply for the 75% wage subsidy, but I do know for sure that they're going to reduce the amount applicable to that 75% wage subsidy by the 10% wage subsidy. And I do know from conversations with the CRA that they're expecting most people that are doing the 75% wage subsidy to also be on this 10% wage subsidy. And they're going to expect some reporting around how much remittance was already reduced. And so
just for clarity there, because obviously there was a lot of questions about this.
Yep.
You are expected to be claiming both because there's so much uncertainty with regard to the 75% subsidy, and the 10% subsidy is already live. We've already helped clients claim like hundreds of thousands of dollars. But these don't stack. These are going to be offsetting, and
exactly.
therefore reporting and controlling that information, sharing with the government is going to be very important when applying for 75%.
It is extremely important. Whether or not you're with HUMI, it's extremely important to have this information on hand. Again, I don't know for sure. They might just go ahead and not ask for it and have some way of tracking it, but I can't imagine that to be possible for them to know, because they're going to need to have the T4 summary amounts at the end of the year to know exactly what your remittance difference was. So I have to imagine, and I have had conversations with the CRA. Again, none of this is set in stone. I'm not speaking on behalf of the CRA or the Canadian government, but my understanding is that the expectation is that you'll have some type of reporting, company level reporting, that looks like this, where you've got your remittance record, the subsidy amount claimed, and the remittance amount sent, especially relevant for applying for that 75% subsidy, and because the subsidy claimed amount is taxable. So you pay tax on it. It's like revenue earned. It's like government revenue earned. And so this is just an example of, this is a fake company, pay period 6 to 12 that covers the full eligibility. They've got gross pay amounts, a subsidy claimed amount, and then the 2 separate remittance records. And then just so everyone like fully grasps this, the subsidy claimed amount plus the remittance sent is always going to be equal to the remittance record. And just to get a little bit into detail here, and actually I'll just flip through with this hyperlink because I already dropped it in here. I dropped this hyperlink into the presentation as well. I created a Google Doc for Wayne Enterprises here. So this is another one of our favorite fictional companies. That's going to be a calculator for everyone on the call. So if you're a really small business and you're doing payroll manually and you're not interested in having a payroll provider help you out, this is a calculator that will help generate the summary for you. So this summary is all calculated. You don't have to worry about doing anything at all. All you have to do is come in here and drop the period start and end date. So if this is a semi-monthly company, so March 16th to March 31st, you can drop these dates in any format that you want. All you have to do is drop these 7 columns in, and you've got everything calculated for you. You need the employees, it's the name or email, just something unique, the gross pay amount, the income tax, and the remittance, and then we'll calculate the subsidy for you with the caps that are triggered, the proration amounts, if the total cap has been hit or the employee cap has been hit, and any of that stuff. And so what you'll do when we send out this PowerPoint presentation, if you want to use this, just come in here, go to File, and then just make a copy for yourself. And just make sure you make a copy for yourself that's private, so that you don't share any of your details with other people that might be using the PowerPoint
Or you could
the Google Sheet.
download, correct? Like, is there a download format for downloading it in Excel?
Exactly. Yeah, you can download it as well. Yep. Exactly. Well said, Simon. So I'm just going to jump back here for a second. One of the other things that's going to be really important on the 10% wage subsidy is just understanding the flow of funds. And so because the flow of funds is different, like completely different than with the 75% wage subsidy. And so in the 75% subsidy, as soon as you apply through the portal, the government will check your eligibility. We don't know what proof points or what collateral is required yet. We do have some suspicions, and I'll get more into that in a second. But what's going to happen is the CRA is going to credit your account. On the other hand, when you're doing the 10% temporary wage subsidy through a payroll provider, there's going to be a different way that they're handling it. So some payroll providers are likely going to reduce the debit amount for your payroll run. So call it, pay period 6, March 15th to March 31st for semi-monthly. Some payroll providers will just reduce the debit amount, and then they'll let you keep that money in your account of the amount of the subsidy. Other payroll providers, and most payroll providers, are taking the other stance where they're still debiting the full amount, everything is being done, and this is the way that Hume is doing it as well. And then as soon as that payroll is run, an automated general message will be sent out. So this is the way that Hume is doing it. An automated general message is being sent out, and we're processing a credit. Now that credit is mostly going back to you that same day. We say 4 business days because we can never guarantee anything depending on which bank you're at, or if you're banking with like a really specific credit union or something like that. What happens then is that your subsidy claim, that credit amount, gets credited to you back from your payroll company directly into your bank account. And so the way that it works is you get the full debit amount from Hume or from your payroll provider, and then the subsidy amount gets processed. You get a little sheet, you get a report that's within your payroll provider, and then the subsidy claim goes back out into your bank account. In Hume as well, and this is the last we'll actually show of Hume. In payroll, you'll also get your COVID wage subsidy reports that you can export to Excel. So like, not everyone is going to have to do the Google Sheet, because a lot of people have payroll providers, but your payroll provider should provide some form of Excel report that you'd be able to generate. And then I'll just open this up. This one probably will just have 2 periods. Yep. And we'll have the 2 periods. And this looks very similar to what I showed you there. You'll have the prorated amount if the cap has been reached, what the post remittance claim is, and then your claims and the subsidies that have been realized. And so as long as you have this type of reporting on a company-wide level, you're in a really good spot, and you'll have some report details as well. So I'm going to jump back in here now. Simon, was there any live questions on this 10% wage subsidy or the facilitation of that? We can jump back into it, but I'm going to jump over to the 75% wage subsidy now. But happy to take any questions about the facilitation of that right now.
Nothing that I see, too actively right here. I think that it makes sense to continue on. I think we're running a little bit behind schedule, and we've got a ton of questions to hopefully get to at the end. So I'll let you continue.
Got it. So now I'm going to dive into this 75%. This is the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. So they're calling it CEWS now. It's got an acronym. So the eligibility, improving eligibility, changed as of yesterday. So Trudeau announced yesterday morning at 11 a.m. that the revenue hurdle for March was going to go from 30% down to 15%. And he also said that for fast-growing companies, for really new startups, the reference for the revenue drop wasn't fair. So he added in that you could also take the month and put it over the average of January and February of 2020. So your trailing 2 months, it's actually not your trailing 2 months, it's fixed to January and February to also prove the revenue drop. So if your revenue, the average of your January and February 2020 revenue, if you saw a 15% drop in March, then you would qualify for that. And the same thing for period 2 and period 3 for April 2020 and for May 2020. One of the things to take into consideration here is that this is not something that you apply for once and you get all 3 months. You have to apply for it each and every period. Now, I saw a question earlier that someone put into saying, how long will this last for? Right now, it's only going to last for 3 periods up until June 6th. I would really truly be guessing if I told you I knew that they would extend this beyond, into period 4, period 5. All I do know is that once it gets released as a CRA portal, you won't see the same type of time lag anymore. As soon as this is available, it will be available for as long as the government wants to offer it. A quick note on accounting and reporting. We don't know, and I've asked the CRA and all this kind of stuff, we don't know what clear collateral is on the reporting requirements. Like, I don't know if sending over, but what types of financial documents or any of that kind of stuff is going to be necessary. They don't have an answer for us yet, and they haven't been advised by the government on what collateral is going to constitute proof. But what we do know is that they're starting to think about it. Yesterday, they announced that the normal accounting method for the employer will be required. They may check previous year's records to make sure that you're using the same accounting methods, as well as they let you know that you can use revenues under the accrual or the cash method, but you can't flip-flop back and forth. I know we have a couple of MPOs on the call as well, and one of the questions that they did ask was, can we include government revenue or can we exclude it? And the answer is that MPOs can choose to include it or not include it, depending on what's more favorable to them. But you have to include it the same in both periods.
Coming back to that, from my perspective, it's been one of the most frustrating components of communication from the government over the last few weeks is just the lack of clarity on how this is going to be applied and how you're going to be qualifying. It sounds as though a lot of the rhetoric is going to rely on goodwill in terms of qualification, and really it sounds to me like a lot of it's going to be self-implied, and that they may be penalizing companies who cross any sort of boundary with some sort of retroactive review of your qualification criteria at year end using a T4 summary or something like that. Yep. Is there any type of indication as to what type of penalties they may impose? Have you heard anything with regard to how they're actually going to be reviewing these applications?
Yeah, so I've had off the record conversations with some of the folks at the CRA, and obviously I won't name any names, and again, completely off the record, but my understanding of this is that this is the part of the entire thing, of all of the response, that they hate the most. This is the part that most employers hate the most. It's not clear. I think personally, if you care about my personal opinion, that this revenue eligibility was the least thought through. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I would not be too surprised if they backed off of this and changed the eligibility requirements. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but them being able to understand, what constitutes as a real revenue drop and a revenue, like quantifying the hurdle, seems almost impossible to me. And so what I believe that they will do is that they will rely mostly, like you said, Simon, on goodwill and good faith, and then fine the bejesus out of anyone that seems to be taking advantage of it. I think that the retribution for trying to take advantage of this when you really feel like your revenue hasn't dropped the hurdle amount, or if it's really easy in accounting to change how revenue looks sometimes, right? Like anyone that's run a business kind of understands that. And so my understanding, Simon, is exactly what you said, is that when this comes in, you'll have some type of cursory collateral requirement, which might be good, because maybe what they really want to do is get money to Canadian businesses faster, right? I want to be have as much good faith towards them as I can, them being the government and these guys that are providing the funds. I believe that they will act very fast. Once this is available, once this portal is up, I believe if you have your house in order, if you have your 10% wage subsidy tracked, and you've got some reporting and some accounting, whether it be income statements or cash flow or whatever it may be, whatever they ask for, if you have your house in order and you can send over some Excel documents or some PDF documents, I believe that they will go ahead and start shipping out the money. Now, that being said, I also believe that if it turns out that you didn't qualify for it in one way or the other, whether it be accounting or reporting, or that you didn't hit the hurdle, I believe that the fines will be substantially severe.
Fair enough.
Now,
Yeah, that kind of aligns with my own expectation.
yeah,
With 15 minutes left and some content and a lot of questions, I'll let you blast through the rest, and
perfect.
so that we can hopefully get to some of the more pressing questions.
Got it. Yeah, I'll take 30 seconds to jump through this. I think this slide is actually the most important one that's left. It's the interactions, the way that the subsidies interact. And so the 75% wage subsidy interacts perfectly with the 10% temporary wage subsidy. Apply for both. Apply for both. Just make sure you have your reporting. With CERB, so CERB and the wage subsidy don't overlap. And this should be self-evident. The CERB is a subsidy that is specifically for people not working, and the wage subsidy is for people that are working. It's actually already happened that a lot of people have got the CERB and have gone back to work and have been rehired, and they've had to pay it back, and that's like a terrible feeling, especially if you're pulling at or you're working with a thin budget. So just to take care of your employees, make sure that these things don't overlap, because it's the employee that actually is going to feel it, not the employer, because the CERB will get clawed back. And then work sharing programs. So this is mostly for part-time workers or for workers that have a reduced schedule due to the virus. These interact perfectly. You just don't get the full amount. You get the amount that is not EI related. And again, I can go into that in more detail. We're just trying to end up quickly. And then some more.
There was a significant question that related to CERB,
Okay.
And specifically with what you just touched on. So I just wanted to clarify. If you had put some employees on a temporary layoff and they had claimed CERB, then obviously, a lot of people did that very quickly before the 75% wage subsidy was announced. Then the 75 wage subsidy is announced. Trudeau comes on TV, says, we want you to retain your employees. That's why we're doing this. So you hire them back. For some people, that CERB payment may be covered a period of time that extended into their return to work. So they would, just to clarify, the onus would be on the employee to repay the CERB. But you can still claim. So as soon as you rehire that employee, you can begin hypothetically claiming the 75% wage subsidy retroactive to that date.
Exactly, 100%. And Simon, this one is very important in the sense that from what we're reading and from what has been reported so far, the onus is going to be on the employee. So if your employee qualified for CERB and got a $2,000 check, that $2,000 check is going to have some documentation around it that says this is for the period of X to X. Let's call it, April 1st to April 14th. This is a $2,000 check for April 1st to April 14th, or it might actually be for the full month. They might be doing CERB for the full month. I haven't seen the period spans that they're doing. I know that it's supposed to be $2,000 a month, so it obviously wouldn't be a $2,000 check for half a month. But what's going to happen is that if you rehire an employee and ROEs are real and the CEWS is real around the period amounts, if there's a period overlap, the employee will have to repay a portion of that CERB. And so that's the onus is going to be on the employee. We do not know how they are going to enforce that yet. We do not know how they are going to ask for repayment. We don't know any of that stuff, but we do know that when it comes income tax time for your employee, it is likely that bill will become due. So it's really important to have a conversation with your employee about that and make sure they're doing the thing that's most beneficial for them and most beneficial for you, because for the most part, wages are obviously higher than CERB for the most part.
Perfect.
The final slide here is just about some delineation. So we had a lot of questions around how the subsidy works with a post-crisis wage deduction. So most people saying, what if I only paid my employee 75% of the wages they were making before? If they were making 40,000, what if I can only pay them 30,000 a year on a salary? Or if I was paying them, $20 an hour, what if I can only pay them $15 an hour? Can I still get the full subsidy? And the answer is actually yes. So you can reduce an employee's wages to 75% of what they were previously making. and then get a subsidy for 100% of their current wages. So a really good example is, a $40,000 employee making $30,000. You would get the full $30,000 covered of gross pay.
Just keep in mind that this is actually an interesting subject we covered last week with an employment lawyer. In a typical situation, and I'm not a lawyer, so this is definitely not legal advice, but in a typical situation, reducing somebody's wages on an annualized basis by more than 8 to 10% may be a trigger for constructive dismissal. In this case, given that the period of time is likely to be short enough that it wouldn't constitute an annual decrease of 8 to 10%, you should be able to avoid that as well. There's an expectation that there's some goodwill with employees when you're making these changes. And so it's really important, if you do plan to reduce wages by 25%, have that conversation with employees and potentially even have them sign documentation that indicates, they are agreeing to this change, just so that it doesn't come back, in the future if changes, in that employee's life, result in some sort of animosity and result in a lawsuit. If you want specific advice on how to avoid that type of situation, definitely reference the call from last week, which is available on our website.
Yeah, 100%. And the spirit of the subsidy is that if you're able to, you maintain existing employees' pre-crisis employment earnings as well. And then finally, continuing to pay employees who are not working. So this is like if you're a local grocery store or something like that, where you've had employees that have been with you for their whole lives or the last 10 years or 5 years, and you have to shut down, but you have the means, you've done well, and you're going to continue to pay employees that aren't working. So they're staying at home, they're being safe, they're not working, but you're continuing to pay their wages. And some employers have reached out to ask how they can do that. Those ones, makes me feel really good about being a fellow Canadian there. You don't owe any of the employer side payroll taxes. So you're going to get 100% of those back. And that's received as a credit from the CRA. So you don't really have to do anything. You just have to, when it comes out, when the portal comes out, that CEWS portal, just say that we've been paying these employees, they have not been working, they're on leave officially, and you'll get back all of your employer taxes related to that.
So there was another specific question that touched on payroll taxes for companies more broadly.
Okay.
Most companies will need to continue to pay those, though, and will not be receiving credit back for specifically their payroll taxes. That is this is the specific situation where those are impacted.
This is the specific situation where the employees are on leave, where they're not actually working and you're continuing to pay them. And this happens more, like I got this question way more than I had expected from UME clients specifically. People saying, hey, we had to shut down shop. We can't continue to operate. Our employees are off. They can't work, but we're going to continue to pay them because they've been with us for a long time and they're great employees, and I don't want to lose them when the crisis is over. And so if that's the case, you do not owe any payroll taxes on them. And so those will get refunded back to you through the CEWS and through the portal when that becomes available. So that's the presentation for today. I had a little just reminder that, as much as this was about a macroeconomic topic and about the specific wage subsidies, it's obviously a really serious issue for many people, and the most important thing is your health. So I'll open up the floor to questions. Simon, you can help facilitate, and we'll fly through it.
There's a lot of questions, so I doubt that we're going to be able to get through everything right away. I'll help by answering one of them that just came through with regard to the Excel spreadsheet. That Excel spreadsheet will be shared. It's going to be sent out with the presentation. It's going to be linked, as well as, I believe, directly attached to the email that's going to be sent to everybody. That Excel sheet is specifically for the 10% wage subsidy, not the 75%. There's not enough information yet on that 75%. And again, it hasn't been approved yet completely by the government to provide something as definitive as an Excel spreadsheet to assist you guys. But jumping into it, there's another question that I think I might even have the answer to, despite the fact I'm not an expert. I've just been so ingrained with this, chatting with you, Chris. For publicly traded corporations, you would not be eligible for the 10% wage subsidy. That's only for private companies, small businesses, not-for-profits, and so forth. But the 75% wage subsidy, so far, the description has been that you're going to have access to that, whether you're publicly traded, privately held, government funded. It really doesn't matter, so long as you're able to show that eligibility criteria of whether it's 15% month over month or 30% year over year, or wherever they end up landing, the 75% wage subsidy is going to apply for everybody.
Yeah, and so it's actually funny. So in this slide here, I have all Canadian private businesses. So when this was originally announced, the wording that came with it in the official press release was all CPCC, so all Canadian privately controlled companies. And so they've since updated that to say all companies within Canada, as long as it's Canadian controlled. And so there hasn't been a whole lot of specific discussion around what does Canadian controlled mean when it's a public company, right? Because there's shareholders and all that kind of stuff when it's a public company and it has to be Canadian controlled. But there will be more eligibility criteria that comes out, and I will follow up with everyone on this webinar. I think we have everyone's email, right? I'll follow up with everyone when we get more details around that, if it's of special note.
So just to continue on, as we only have a couple of minutes, it doesn't matter when you've hired an employee, correct? So if you were to hire an employee for the 75% wage subsidy or the 10% wage subsidy, you could hire that employee today and they would be eligible if your company's eligible.
Exactly, that's totally true. The only thing is they wouldn't have any pre-crisis, they wouldn't have a pre-crisis wage or a pre-crisis salary. So you wouldn't be able to reduce it and then get 100%. So any new employees is always going to be up to 75%. For any new employees on the 10% temporary wage subsidy, it still is going to contribute to your cap. But all of that is everything that you said is true.
Okay.
The one caveat that I will make is if you're self-employed and you have not been on payroll before and you want to help your business by putting yourself onto payroll and then claiming the subsidy, that will likely not work, because if you're self-employed, you're not arm's length. So I would advise against that. It's not 100% clear that you can't do it, but when the government uses the words arm's length, they usually mean that you don't have a controlling interest in the business. So if you own over 40% of the company, that's usually the rule for EI. You are likely going to get caught for doing that. So I would advise against that.
So another question, just with regard to employee types, and this one's tricky. I don't know if you'll have the answer. It seems like a tough one to me. Contractors, maybe you know this. So if you typically employ a number of contractors, would those be eligible for either of these subsidies, or because they're not technically part of your entity, are they excluded?
So the 75% wage subsidy, I don't want to comment on yet, because they're like I said, they changed a whole bunch of it yesterday, and they may change a whole bunch of it again tomorrow. But as of right now, if you don't pay payroll taxes on them, like if you're not responsible for remitting your employer side CPP and employer side EI on them, the contractors will not qualify.
And similarly, if they are government-sponsored employees, so if you're a not-for-profit and a group of your employees are paid for through government grants or directly by the government, they wouldn't qualify either. And how would somebody look to handle that if they're reporting on it?
And this is a nonprofit organization, or this is just someone that has a government grant associated with paying the employee?
I'm going to assume a not-for-profit, although I'm sure that this would apply for both.
Yeah, for sure. And so it depends. So a lot of government sponsored jobs are part of the Canadian Summer Job Program, because they're generally trying to place people into different companies. And so there's a whole set of different rules for that. And again, you can really jump into the support for business. You can click into here and then find out with the Canada Summer Jobs Program what's going on there. In terms of if the salary is completely paid by the government, it would depend, I think, case to case. And again, I'm happy to follow up with the person that's asking that question individually, but I think it would depend case to case if the flow of funds is actually through you're paying it, or if the government is paying directly for it, because it really depends on how that's being facilitated.
So I would love to continue to blast through questions here. We have dozens still remaining in the queue. And of course, a number even that have carried over from the questionnaire we sent out yesterday. Unfortunately, though, we're reaching here the end of the allotted time. So what we're going to do here on our side is review questions and try to make sure that everybody has answers. If there are substantial changes, or when we finalize or the government finalizes the 75% wage subsidy, there's a good chance that we'll probably run a second webinar to make sure that we can provide clarity on that subsidy in more detail. Obviously, there's a lot of questions about it right now, but the truth is, at least my expectation is, despite Chris's connection with CRA and his level of commitment to understanding all of these programs, there's still not enough clarity on that program to answer most of those questions right now. So we're going to be replying to every question that has an answer. And the ones that don't, again, most of those would probably fall into the 75% wage subsidy category, and we're likely to run a subsequent webinar to cover that in the weeks that come. So again, Chris, thank you so much for putting this together. We're going to be sending this around. Again, the links are all via that little Canadian flag in the top left corner.
Yeah.
The spreadsheet's going to be included, and hopefully this was really helpful for everybody who joined today. Sorry that this hour passed so quickly. Always seems to, but we're looking forward to seeing you all again on another webinar if and when it might be applicable to the things that you guys are looking to learn. Last but not least, if there are other topics that you guys are interested in learning about, things that relate to payroll, to group benefits, HR topics, legal, this is our area of expertise. We have a lot of experts that we can draw on, whether internal like Chris, or external partners, lawyers, HR consultants, and so forth. So if you have any ideas, things you'd like to hear us cover over the next few weeks, we'd be happy to hear them. You're welcome to email us, write in the chat. Whatever works best for you, but we want to be helpful, not just for our own clients, but for anybody that would like to attend. So thank you all. Look forward to doing this all again sometime soon.
Thanks all. And if you have any urgent questions, like I said, I'll get back to you today. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Chris. See ya.